And we're live.
Hey, we are live.
Jeff, how you doing, bud?
I'm awesome. Thanks for coming out here.
Well, thanks for coming on with us. This is a busy time of the year. It's wild.
Yeah, I know. Been up pretty early. We were actually harvesting a bunch of Syrah off of our Willow Creek property this morning. So that's still finishing up, but happy I can join you over here.
Yeah, and Jeff is with Onx, and kind of give us a little information about what you do for Onx.
Sure. So, I'm actually about to hit my 10-year anniversary this coming January. So, done a little bit of everything here. Started as associate winemaker, but now I've moved up into Director of Operations and Winegrowing. So, basically running all of the business and hospitality side, as well as both of our estate vineyards here.
So you have the dress up, Jeff, and then the dirty boots, Jeff. You do a little bit of both.
I'm kind of notorious for underdressing, even on the business side. So it's what we used to call winemaker chic, which is basically playing the game where people aren't sure if you're homeless or working somewhere.
Play the homeless or hipster game, right?
I only am clean shaven because we did a dinner in the vines in the middle of the vineyard on Saturday night, so 2 nights ago. Otherwise, I had all the long, scraggly grays coming out and hair that badly needed a trimming.
A question we ask everybody, I think we pretty much start every podcast with, what got you into wine? How did it start? Because you said you were from the East Coast, right?
So I'm one of your classic second career guys in wine. I was just fortunate enough to realize early on my interest in my first career. I started out in New England, so I grew up in Connecticut. Went to engineering school in the Massachusetts, got a chemical engineering degree, ended up, oddly for today's day and age, I worked in viral vaccine development for 6 years.
Wow.
So did scale up and stuff for that. But, in your early 20s, you have all those dumb conversations with all your buddies as you get drunk, and you're like, man, if I could do it all over again, I'd do this or that. And I'm kind of that jerk friend who's like, dude, you're 22, you don't have a wife or even a dog, like you can do what you want tomorrow. So I had told people I really had a lot of interest in trying to get into wine just because I'd taken a bunch of trips out to wine country, periodically split a timeshare with a friend of mine out in Napa, and just started realizing, this isn't very far away from the fermentation science that I kind of do. And eventually you tell enough people something that you'd be embarrassed to not at least try it. So I ended up getting the pharma company I worked for to pay for just some prereq courses that I knew I needed to get into UC Davis's master's program.
Sweet.
And I mean, it was just a no-brainer signature for them because I just wanted to take cheap community college courses instead of like all my buddies who wanted, super expensive stuff at UPenn. So they're just like, yeah, whatever, we'll pay for whatever you want. And I ended up, filling all those prereqs, sending in my application, and as luck would have it, I didn't even realize I had the perfect background for it because they want people who can generate research or publishable research papers. So I ended up getting accepted and getting offered a scholarship to cover out-of-state tuition to go out there, which made the decision pretty easy. So one day I go up to my boss and told him I'm quitting, and when I explained why, he's like, well, you're the first person I'm not going to try to talk out of quitting. Because, usually in that industry and this industry, someone's quitting to get a 3% raise, a mile down the road or something. And in this case, it was, totally different career, a great opportunity. So I embarked and drove all my possessions 3,000 miles down Route 80 from Philadelphia out to Davis, California.
That's awesome.
That's just like starts. The idea that you wanted to get the wine. Like, I mean, you said you went out to California and you hung out, shared a timeshare. Is that or something?
That was a place to crash while you visit a million wineries.
The wine part of it, like, did you drink wine when you were back east?
So started getting into it in college. Really. Branched out of beer pretty quickly and, drank wine, drank spirits, really got into Unfortunately, I got into high-end whiskey in college because that was before people knew what Pappy Van Winkle was, and I can say I was part of a group that regularly got a case discount on buying it because
Wow.
it was our regular poker night whiskey.
Wow.
You know,
It's a good poker night
if you can
whiskey.
imagine 20 years ago when stuff was, actually available.
Yeah.
But so started just getting into different things. The summer after my freshman year, I worked at a super high-end hotel out in Cape Cod. And I very quickly realized room service is just a horrible job. Really, anything with split shifts, working morning and evening with breaks in the middle, not my ideal cup of tea. So I politicked my way into creating a barback job there to support all of the restaurants on site. And one of my gigs was pulling all the expensive, fancy French bottles out of the cellar. And that's where you start asking yourselves, like, well, what is the difference between this Beringer White Zinfandel and this Chateau Latour Pouligny Montrachet? Not that I would have pronounced it that way at the time, but
There are big differences.
yeah, just slight differences. Color aside, I know I just named a pink wine and a very expensive Chardonnay, but details.
Oh, speaking of pink, here's your rosé. We sell it. We sell, gosh, every bit of the wines that our distributor carries from you guys.
Awesome.
And
Except we haven't got the new label.
we haven't
yet.
got that new label yet.
That label is beautiful.
But and we've had Drew on the podcast, and he was really great. He's one of our first. I think he was one of our first people.
He was early on, but what
Yeah.
we did was we were lucky enough to get tasted on these, very right before the pandemic. Actually, is how it happened, and we thought that they were phenomenal. We loved every
We
single
like the
one.
styles too. Like there's so many different styles that you
Yeah.
guys put out. So many different blends.
The labeling was great.
Labeling
Everything
was
about
amazing.
it was awesome.
Beautiful. Like you guys are smart in the way the retail part of it.
We jumped on. We brought everything into the store that was in our market, and then the world shut down. And it's a very interesting thing trying to sell people wines who they've never heard of before, they've never seen, and they're out of Paso, and that's a growing community. And now what do we do with it? So we started this podcast, and we thought, we've got to get Drew on here. Like, we have to get him on and let people know. And as soon as we did, I mean, we blew out everything we had.
It
at
was
that point
crazy.
in time.
We started sending your wine back to California.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh!
Like because for some reason there might have been something that you guys had run out of or something like that, so we were sending your wine back to California. We were like giggling about it
all
Like,
over. It was
But
yeah,
that's
it
the
was
beauty of Florida and California shipping regulations. We're a
Yeah.
little less strict on alcohol too.
yeah. We ship and you ship, and it's intermingled, so that it's very easy for us to ship back out to California. But yeah, your blends are so cool. And how many? Since you're in the vineyards all the time, how many varietals do you guys have planted or
We've
purchased?
officially got 20 going right now, and just planted our 21st. So we do have a little bit of Roussanne now out at our other estate, Kyler Canyon.
oh wow.
But even when I originally moved down here, it was kind of like those life choices, those key moments, right? Where I'm like, should I stay up in Napa, get an assistant winemaker job, and talk about 20 different blocks of Cabernet as if they were different varieties, or move down to Paso and have the chance to oversee a site that, at the time was growing, I think, 14 different varieties, and now obviously we've increased that.
Wow, doubled it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, what a
that's
great
crazy.
decision. I mean, that 10 years ago, right? Is that when
Mm-hmm.
so at that point in time, Paso was not a common name, and you jumped on it. I mean, we talked about it. This is the reason we came here first. Was we love this area. The climate is perfect. Soil types. I mean, it's a perfect situation for making great wine.
And again, I think more varietals too. There's more varietals grown here, and you get a little take on each little varietal. We saw a varietal yesterday from where was it? Do you remember, Jim? I don't remember. It was
I don't
Lithuania
remember.
or something that somebody was messing around with.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely get it out here. I mean, well, there's also the game where everyone likes to call varieties by their, European acronyms. Like, are you growing Zinfandel or Sorlchanak or, whatever the
Yeah.
original Croatian term was. But yeah, there's, a great history of that in Paso because, quite frankly, we're not as limited by the economics as you would be up north.
Absolutely.
I mean, I hate to say it, like at a certain point, if you're paying, $400,000 an acre or whatever to get something planted, this and that, you almost have to grow Cabernet just because of the sale value of that product once it hits the market. And having your own property where you're growing things for yourself first and foremost, and two, just being in Paso, which is a lot more open-minded. I like to joke we're the Languedoc of California, except then I have to explain Languedoc and everything else.
To a lot of people.
So it's more of a good joke for myself and no one else. But the main point of that is just we're not constrained by rules. Like, yes, I would say your average consumer coming up here generally is looking for things in a Rhone style or sometimes a cab-driven base, depending what their past experience with Paso is. But I think the great thing is while they're here, people are super open-minded about trying Tempranillo-based wine or being like, hey, let's get into Malbec, or God help them if they encounter some of our more old-school places that are growing, Cabernet Pfeffer and Carmenere and every other variety under the sun as well. But that's also why I was super excited with our most recent planting way on the west side of this property. I think maybe in some ways the most analogous wine region in the world to Paso is in many ways the Douro Valley in Portugal. So being able to get some Touriga Nacional, some Sazao, and I know I'm not in any way pronouncing this like someone from Portugal actually would, but you don't want to hear me trying to imitate that accent.
But it is. You guys do have the mountains and the hills, and we always talk about you have 11 sub-AVAs, right? I mean, so it gives you like a lot of diversity and styles. Like you guys have terroir here. I mean, it is definitely here. You taste it in the wines. You know it. And in your vineyards, what is your soil composition? What do you guys usually, or do you have multiples?
We do have multiples, and especially between the two sites. This property that we're on now, our home estate, Onx Estate, it's kind of the joining of a couple alluvial fans. You can see right behind me where we're sitting is actually the creek bed here, so Santa Rita Creek right behind me. Lots of cool air comes from the mountains on the west side, and as you guys know, just from living on the East Coast in general, heat follows temperature gradients. So all that cold air sits at the bottom of your house or in your basement. Second story, if you have one, is always way hotter. Same deal out here in that morning. All of the cool air and fog comes in through the mountains and just follows all the creeks going east. So we have this channel bringing it straight through. We get this cooling influence every morning and afternoon, and that's what allows us to grow so many varieties anyways, and have that range. But, it's just allowed us to really take care of all that on the climate side and back to the soil side. So, down by the creek here, just following what creek beds naturally do, we always have a deep alluvium, which means generally you're going to have water much more shallowly. So it's pretty accessible on this property. You have a little more clay content by the creek, which is why we have all of our white varieties planted there. So right in front of us, we have Viognier, Sauvignon Blanc, and then way down that way, some Grenache Blanc. And then we tend to get a little more sandstone going north and west on the property. And that's where you'll also see, I'm sure as you guys drove in, you saw some of those big calcite, limestone shale rocks.
Yeah.
So there's a couple over there.
Big round.
Or you see even that piece of shale
Right
there
there,
with
yeah.
all the fossilized seashells and scallop shells in there. I mean, everything here was an ancient alluvial seabed, and people forget that basically going out to the Rockies, it all used to be under the ocean. Like, I know guys from 2 miles east of here, like inland California, who hunt megalodon teeth as like a hobby. So you just think how deep the water had to be to have,
So
all these
crazy.
whale bones and giant fish and monster fossils and stuff around.
We saw when we drove in, and to me it looked like bush vine. Or, what was that?
Yeah, so those are head-trained Grenache blocks.
Ah, you called it.
So, head training is something you have to be kind of careful about what you put in there, what varieties you choose, just because you ultimately want something that actually puts out laterals and creates a little shade for itself. And Grenache is really good at doing it. As you've driven around Paso, I'm sure you've seen lots of Zinfandel around
Yeah, of
here
course.
in that
Yeah.
style. But you don't want something that's sort of vertically trained, just because then you won't have very much shade cover, and you run the risk of sunburning, raisoning, whatever level you want to call it at. But yeah, so we've been really excited to use those, and those particular blocks definitely are able to ripen their rachises, so that internal skeleton of the cluster, a lot more. So we actually like to use them. I say we, Drew and Lily and team, love using those for whole cluster fermentations as well. So you can get the stems in there and get a little bit more of that spiciness with
I
it.
like that.
Yeah.
I like that whole cluster fermentation style.
Absolutely.
But we're a little wine geeky, so you know.
So how is harvest going for you? I would imagine by now you probably have most of the whites, the Viognier, and the Sauv Blanc probably.
So our last 2 whites hanging out there, we still have a little bit of Picpoul Blanc and Grenache Blanc.
Oh.
And those are just huge clusters, so they're kind of late ripeners on the white side. But we've actually picked all the Tempranillo for that rosé we were talking about. And on Kyler Canyon Vineyard, our other property, the one that's much more newly replanted since we took it over, we have some very early ripening Grenache, just because that's a site at elevation, has very steep, thinner soils. It's all decomposed limestone on there. And all of these things just kind of point towards early ripening. So all that Syrah is off as of today, and we just have a little bit of Mourvèdre left out there.
Yeah, you said you were here pretty early today. As you know, today, are you harvesting anything today?
Mm-hmm.
You are.
So yeah, we should be just wrapping up now, picking about somewhere between 10 and 11 tons of Syrah out of the Kyler Canyon estate.
So are you doing any night harvesting at all?
We start around 3 in the morning, so whether you want to call that night
I
or
call that
morning
night.
harvest.
It's too early for me.
But yeah, definitely picking under lights, and that's for 2 reasons. I mean, one, obviously, you always want to do what's best for the fruit and the wine, and bringing that in cold is definitely better. It keeps the fruit intact. It really limits your breakage, insect, like bee damage. And beyond that, it's also much better for our guys that are working, too, because it just, even though it doesn't feel like in any way cold right now, the difference between working and sweating really hard and this versus and the pre-sunrise temperatures, it definitely makes a difference. You always see a noticeable speed decrease once the sun is fully up and it starts to warm, and I don't blame them. You know, I'm very much a work in the cool myself kind of guy.
Yeah. So what idea or what time do you think you might be finishing harvest this year? Like, what time do you think you'll have it wrapped up? Just a guess. You know?
We're typically a pretty late ripening site, being that we're down along the creek. We get this cool air here. So it's usually a safe bet. Like, I tell people our last picks will be the week of Halloween, typically. And some years, like last year, where crop was really light and set thin anyways, and we had intense heat, we can finish 2 weeks before that. But I always give people the late guess so that they're not upset if it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So right out of school, is this the first winery that you came to work for?
As I finished school, so I worked at Maryvale during, right before my last year in grad school up in St. Helena.
Yeah.
Then right after finishing, or as I was finishing grad school, I worked at Franciscan in Rutherford.
Sure.
Jumped over, finished school up and worked for Molly Duker out in Australia. And then jumped back to Rutherford and worked for Round Pond Estate. And that was where I ended up hooking up with Stephen Olson, the family that owns this whole property, and really being afforded the chance to come down here and kind of help direct and start up a newer brand.
Well, you definitely got some heavy hitters under your belt.
Yeah.
The resume is pretty stacked. And this is phenomenal wine. This is a reason we wanted to showcase Paso was there is some really great stuff coming out of here right now, and this is no exception. I think that you touched on it earlier. The price per bottle is unbelievable. I mean, the value's there. And it's not what Paso was at one point in time and thought to be, just big, high, flabby cabs or, whatever you were drinking at that point. Now it's much more elegant, refined, beautiful expressions of a ton of different grapes. And you can really showcase who you are and be the artist and put your stamp on that bottle. And I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, the wines definitely have a sense of place and style of its own for this region. And we also, one thing we've noticed too is like you guys have really done well on like bringing people in. We see the event spaces, we see all those things that are going to bring people in, and just it's just so pretty out here, and the weather's so
gorgeous
nice,
property. Yeah.
and we really love to come out here and be able to talk to all these winemakers and viticulture, anybody that's in this field we just love. So I'm sure, again, you're a busy guy. And,
happy to be here, excited to have the chance, and and I think you guys touched on it too, and I think a big part of it is maybe I've just spent too long on the business side lately, but it's kind of the changing nature of what wineries are and how they connect with their customers. There was a time 10, 15 years ago where it literally was just sort of building that palace on the hilltop, and people would come because it was there. And I think nowadays things are driven in a very different sense. We pride ourselves on being very deeply connected to our estates and really try to make any of our consumer experiences extremely educational, whether you want to call it ecotourism in the broader across the U.S. sense. But even starting about 9 years ago, I would say, I realized it wasn't nearly so interesting just doing tastings off the back patio of Steve Olson's house up on the top of the hill there. So instead, I started driving people around in a little Kawasaki Mule, a side-by-side utility vehicle. And basically, as we tasted the wines, making people put their hands on some vines, teaching them just, very basic ampelography and vineyard stuff, and really just trying to be a person through which people could ask any genuine question they ever had about wine. Because I think this industry, more than any other one I've ever seen, does a horrible job of making our own consumers afraid of our product.
I agree completely.
Like it's face-slappingly insulting to me when I watch like just someone be on that snob level about wine with someone who's trying to pay money for wine.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have seen it at some point in stores or restaurants.
Unfortunately, I've had to be a part of it. I mean, I come from high-end restaurants. I'm a sommelier, walking over in a tux and, white gloves and doing the whole thing. And it's like, man, this sucks. It's cool. I love it, but it's awful, And when we started this podcast, we decided, we wanted to be the absolute opposite of that. We wanted to be, kind of more relaxed, chill. We don't script anything. We go into it, and sometimes we put our foot in our mouth. We've said some dumb stuff.
And I want to be champions of the education of wine and how it's made, and the whole spectrum. What it's like, for distributors. What it's like, for people like you that are in the vineyards, and what it's like for Drew that's in the winery, and Carrie, who has to, meet us out here early in the morning to do this. So I think that's, a lot of people don't know what the whole industry is. And when you said, that whole idea of bringing people out and showing them wineries and giving them that education, that's what our customers want. When we come out to wine tours, and we do them all over the world, they love stuff like that. If they just go to a tasting room and just have a tasting, that was all right. Mm-hmm. But when somebody walks them through the step by step, and guess what that does? That gets them more fired up. Mm-hmm. It gets them to tell their friends, and everybody makes out. So I
think wine's just all about community. It's bringing people together, and getting people to have fun, let their guards down, and just enjoy themselves anyways. I mean,
absolutely.
Anyone you bring out here, I certainly hope they're on vacation. So that's what it's all about. It shouldn't be work. You shouldn't be afraid of saying the wrong thing. There shouldn't be a wrong thing. I hate the concept that there's secrets in the wine industry. And we've more or less been doing the same thing for, a couple thousand years now, if you go back to China and everything. And beyond that, even the technology we discuss as if it were new and hush-hush in wine, it was all developed, 20 or 30 years ago for other fruit. Like the first time someone sees an optical sorter and they're like, oh my God, this is new. I'm like, they used it like 30 years ago for blueberries. We're just kind of behind the eight ball here.
Yeah, in this business, they are pretty interesting. I do love looking. I know maybe I'm
It is
geeky,
cool.
but I do.
No,
love
no, I
That's
think it's
amazing.
awesome. I just mean, I just like purporting it as if it were like this newly
New
thing.
manufactured
Something new.
technology. I mean,
We have this brand new technology that only we have. You gotta check it out.
no, trust me, you don't have to worry about geekiness with technology with me. One of my classes at UC Davis, like we took a tour of the local Budweiser factory, and when I was walking by their cleaning skid in the background, I may have been overheard going, "Ooh, a Tugendhaken valve." And my professor had to explain mix-proof valves and cleaning to everyone there, and I'm like, I'll just shut up.
Yeah, that's good.
That's awesome, man.
So, and again, you guys, the winery itself is at Tin Can. Is that right?
Yeah, so Tin City.
Tin City. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
So Tin City is this whole urban winery
Very
enclave
cool.
just south of downtown Paso, right off the highway, super easy to get to, and it's where we have our main tasting room and the production facility. But the great thing is you can literally park your car and spend all day there.
Yeah.
There's 25 wineries, a cidery, a brewery, or maybe 2 breweries now, and then there's an incredible pasta manufacturer, there's
Heard
a
about
restaurant, there's food trucks, and don't forget the sheep's milk ice cream. That's great too.
Wow.
So
We're gonna run out there.
yeah, there's no shortage of stuff to do while you're out there.
Well, we've been so damn busy on this trip, and everyone's been talking about Tin City, and we're like, well, we're gonna get there, and then we drove into it today,
Mm-hmm.
and we're like, oh, so we're making time for this tonight. This is
Yeah.
what we're gonna
when
do.
we're done our last podcast, that's where we're gonna head.
Absolutely. So again, thank you so much for coming on. You touched on it a minute ago, and I'm going to reiterate. I think it's less about what's in your glass and more who you spend that bottle with. And I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today.
No, thanks for coming out here and being, part of the solution to wine's problem. Which is, let's give out all the information to people.
Please.
Let's not treat them like they're idiots or can't possibly understand what we're doing with wine.
Yeah.
We're here to make friends and build community. So.
Absolutely. And tell everyone where they can find you on social media, Instagram, wherever.
Yeah, absolutely. So just look up at Onx Wines. So ONX. There's no Y in there. And you can find us onyxwines.com. All pretty simple and consistent that way.
Awesome.
All right. Well,